So, Mike, when you look at immigration, I think for a lot of South Africans, it's quite a key topical
Mm.
point that they discuss. And with a lot of headlines that you're looking at today, yesterday, whenever the case, whether it's about the political uncertainty, the water shortages, or even load shedding, the list goes on and on. But those are generally the headlines that we're seeing. I imagine, and it would be great if you can share from your personal experience. There's often a deeper motivation besides just the headlines for one to eventually take the plunge and make the move.
Look, the aspects you mentioned are typically the big drivers for people. It's about uh, the future prosperity for themselves and their family. Those are normally the big drivers, but that's not always the case. So it may depend on your life stage. Maybe you're young, you want to try new things, you want to try and live in a different environment, a different culture. You maybe want to travel, see different parts of the world. But if you're older, you're more settled with a partner and a family, the considerations are clearly different. So I would typically divide the considerations up into three buckets.
Okay.
It's probably emotional considerations, like leaving your friends, your family, you're going to miss out on
Yeah.
joint life events. There are definitely financial considerations, and I'm sure we'll chat a little
Yeah.
bit more about those. And then there's practical or operational considerations. Living and moving overseas, especially if you have a family,
Yeah.
is a big thing. And there's a lot one needs to consider because life and how you run your life will be different.
I suspect it's probably something that a lot of people that look at immigrating underestimate the value of the networks. And that's from a social perspective, even a business perspective and growing one's career. And also families, anybody raising kids, your network that you've built and established over the years, that's got to count for something.
Even though you might be conscious of it, I think in general, South Africans underestimate how readily available and affordable support is in SA. Whether it's childcare through a nanny, whether it's cleaners, whether it's family support, you just have that more readily available and more affordably here. Social support, family support is one thing, but you've also touched on business networks. If you are trying to succeed commercially, work overseas, those can be valuable. And you may need to realize that you may be starting from scratch, or you may not have the same extent of those over there as you had in SA, which, to be honest, makes it easier to do business, to win commercially. So I would also suggest giving that some thought, depending what you do and what work you do.
But the other thing, talking about all these considerations, especially from a financial perspective, is tax.
Mm,
And look, to be fair, whether you are leaving or staying in South Africa, you can't get away from the tax man.
yeah,
Um,
it's a very important point.
yeah.
And whether you like it or not, the tax situation is going to become more complicated for you. Typically, an individual who lives in South Africa pays tax here based on their global earnings and global gains. Um, if you leave the country and you don't want to pay tax globally in South Africa anymore, you have to change your tax residence. And that's a formal process with SARS. People used to call it financial immigration, but there's a process to follow.
Yeah.
And what that will mean is you would no longer pay tax on everything in South Africa, only what residual income maybe you have here. And you will typically pay tax then in your new country of residence or based on your earnings in different countries.
Right.
Okay, so there's a process to do that. Is a little bit complicated. You may need help. If you do formally change tax residence or financially immigrate, there's also what SARS calls a deemed disposal of all your investments worldwide, and that may trigger capital gains tax. So
Right.
can be a bit complicated. Pros and cons to doing it. If you are leaving permanently and you don't think you're ever going to come back, it is something you're going to have to deal with at some point.
Yeah.
So try and get on the front foot, maybe get some advice and work out how to navigate it.
You started touching on around investments,
Mm.
and obviously that's quite relevant. Look at, say, an established individual. Um, Assuming that you've obviously accumulated assets, whether from a property perspective and an investment side, whether it's compulsory monies,
Mm.
your RAs, your pension funds,
Yes,
if you've
yes.
been employed, what are the implications or things
Mm.
that are worth considering
Yeah.
around that?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, it's something that's definitely worth considering before you move if you do have assets or investments. And the rules are slightly different depending what you have and where you have it. We know that South Africa still has foreign exchange controls around how much money you can take out of the country. And if you formally immigrate or change your tax residence, that changes a little bit as well. Okay, so there may be different considerations and restrictions. When it comes to retirement funds, pension funds, preservation funds have always allowed you, when you leave employment, to take that money, to cash them in, potentially paying tax in the process. But you could do that, and then you could externalize the money or take it with you when you leave with SARS permission. Retirement annuities never used to work like that. They never used to allow you any access before you turned 55. That has now changed. So a few years ago, the laws were changed so that if you do change tax residence or financially immigrate, if you've been out of the country for more than 3 years, you can then access your retirement annuity. Again, potentially paying tax in the process. Property works differently. You need to actually sell up the property in South Africa. You may or may not pay capital gains tax, and then you may need to externalize the proceeds thereafter. Okay, so those are typically some of the biggest assets that people will have.
It's a complex decision. Bottom line is at least get somebody to help you to
Yeah.
work through some of these considerations and what's best, what are the pros and cons in terms of one's individual situation. The other side of it that I've often wondered
Mm,
is around your life insurance. When you
mm,
look at life insurance, the way I see it is you've obviously built some history with whoever you're insured with.
mm.
How does that work, especially considering the two camps? The one camp saying, I'm putting my feelers out, I'm staying in the country for a couple of years until I make the final decision, and the other camp that's financially immigrated. Um,
And I'm glad you introduced those two camps, because I
sure.
think that is probably the main driver of what you're going to do. But what I will say is it depends whether you want to keep your policies or not.
Okay.
If you may be temporarily going overseas, maybe you do want to keep them. Even if you're going permanently overseas, you may still want to keep them. And the reason may be that maybe you're now older, maybe you're going to struggle to get cover elsewhere. Maybe you want to check it out first to see what cover you can get overseas. And most South African life assurers, if you're going to a Western country, will allow you to keep most of your cover. But you'd have to check with your insurer first. The downside of that is that your cover is in rands, and you typically have to pay your premiums still here in South Africa. So you have to take that into account. If, on the other hand, you do decide you want to cancel, you must also consider the trade offs in that. So, again, maybe you can't get cover elsewhere, maybe you want to come back. So, again, you've got to think through those things. You may need some advice from an advisor. You may need to speak to the insurer about whether they're going to cover you in a specific country. But whatever you do, you probably mustn't rush into this decision. Just
Right.
think about it quite
Yeah.
carefully.
And tax in terms of life policies, if you is that not a
No,
consideration? Yeah.
again, it depends. Most of the modern life insurance policies are pure risk policies. There's no investment value, surrender value, so there shouldn't be material tax implications. If they are life wrapped investments, like endowment style policies or offshore endowments, then those are clearly different. Those are not pure risk or pure protection policies.
All right. Look, Mike, I think you've given us lots to think about, and thanks for sharing from personal
Mm.
experience. With this complex decision and whether it's financial, emotional, what would you say as the one thing that you want people to take out of this? Or maybe what did you underestimate as part of your move, or what did you overemphasize as part of your move, but it turned out not to be exactly that?
So, look, I mean, I've done this twice. The first time I was younger, no kids, it just felt a heck of a lot easier. I felt like I had one suitcase, that was about it, and that's also okay. If you are older, if you do have a partner, if you have a family, there are genuinely material considerations here. So what would I say I've underestimated? Look, I think it's a big logistical thing when you move later in life with a family. There are lots of considerations: yourself, your family, your work, schooling, support, financial. Um, I think I overestimated how difficult it would be for my kids, and that's actually been easier than I thought. Maybe they're more adaptable than we are.
Went in with your eyes
Maybe
open.
maybe
Yeah.
expect it to be hard, and then if it is, you'll be okay.
Yeah. No, thanks once again for sharing your valuable experience, Mike.
Thank you.
Cheers.